The diner was nearly empty when Sarah walked in, the faint chime of the doorbell breaking the silence. It was 2 a.m., and the only other patron, an old trucker, sat slumped over his coffee. Sarah, a 26-year-old night shift nurse, had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift and desperately needed a hot meal before heading home. As she slid into the corner booth, she noticed something odd outside the frosted glass window. 2 children stood at the edge of the parking lot, unmoving despite the biting winter wind. Their figures were barely illuminated by the flickering neon sign, casting an eerie glow. The waitress approached with a tired smile. "What can I get you, hon?" "Coffee and maybe a slice of pie," Sarah replied, glancing back at the window. The children hadn't moved. "Kids out there?" the waitress asked, following her gaze. "Yeah, it's weird for them to be out this late," Sarah said. The waitress shrugged. "Probably some prank. Teenagers are always messing around here." She walked off, leaving Sarah with her uneasy thoughts. Minutes later, a loud knock startled her. Sarah turned to see the children standing right outside the door, their faces obscured by the shadows. One of them, a boy around 10, knocked again, harder this time. His companion, a girl who couldn't have been older than 8, stood silently beside him. The waitress frowned. "I'll handle it," she muttered, heading to the door. Sarah couldn't hear the exchange, but the boy gestured toward the parking lot, his movements stiff and unnatural. The girl tilted her head, her pale face catching the light briefly. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Something about them was off. The waitress hesitated before shaking her head and closing the door. She returned, visibly shaken. "What did they want?" Sarah asked. "They said they were lost and needed a ride home," the waitress replied, her voice low. "But I got a bad feeling. Their eyes, they didn't look right." Sarah's curiosity got the better of her. She stood and walked to the window, peering out cautiously. The children were gone. She returned to her seat, her heart pounding. The coffee tasted bitter now, and the warmth of the diner felt stifling. She tried to shake off the unease, telling herself they were just kids playing tricks. Half an hour later, Sarah stepped into the icy night. Her car was parked at the far end of the lot, the only vehicle left besides the waitress's beat-up sedan. She pulled her coat tighter and hurried across the cracked asphalt, her boots crunching in the snow. As she unlocked the car, a soft voice called out, "Miss?" She turned sharply. The children were standing just a few feet away, their faces fully visible now. Sarah gasped. Their eyes were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just endless, soulless darkness. "Can you help us?" the boy asked, his tone unnervingly calm. Sarah stumbled backward, her keys slipping from her hand. I can't. Please," the girl whispered. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "We need to come in. It's so cold." Every instinct screamed at Sarah to run, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. The boy stepped closer, his expression blank, yet unnervingly intense. "We can't come in unless you let us," he said. "No!" Sarah shouted, finally finding her voice. She fumbled for her keys, her trembling hands barely cooperating. The children stared at her, unblinking. For a moment it felt as though the darkness in their eyes was spreading, seeping into the night. The air grew heavy, and Sarah's breath came in short, panicked gasps. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the children were gone. Sarah scrambled into her car, locking the doors and starting the engine with shaking hands. She sped out of the lot, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror. There was no sign of them, but the sense of dread lingered. When she finally reached her apartment, Sarah locked every door and window, her heart still racing. She tried to rationalize what she had seen, convincing herself it was exhaustion playing tricks on her mind. But deep down, she knew the truth. That night, as she lay in bed, a soft knock echoed through her apartment. "Miss?" Her blood ran cold. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. She didn't dare move, her eyes fixed on the crack under the door. Shadows shifted outside, and the boy's voice came again, colder this time. "Let us in." Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, her trembling hands clutching the blanket. The knocking stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. The next morning, the door was scratched and splintered, as though something had tried to claw its way in. Sarah never stayed out late again.